Who should actually put this HP ZBook 8 G1i in their bag? Who can walk past it? And does the price make sense for a day-to-day buyer? Those are the three questions that keep popping up whenever I see a mobile workstation that looks more like a high-end laptop on steroids. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Before we dive into the specs, let's talk about the hesitation most people feel when they stare at a $3,000+ price tag. Will I really need all this power? Will it fit in my normal workflow? And what am I giving up if I go for this instead of a more mainstream laptop? The ZBook line is marketed as a mobile workstation, which basically means it's built for people who can't afford to be tethered to a desktop but still need desktop-class performance. That definition already narrows the field. If you're a freelance video editor who often shoots on location, a civil engineer who runs Revit and Navisworks on site, or a data scientist juggling massive datasets in Jupyter notebooks, the idea of a 16-inch 3840x2400 screen with a buttery-smooth 120Hz refresh is genuinely appealing. On the other hand, if your daily routine is checking email, scrolling social media, and the occasional spreadsheet, the extra horsepower is likely overkill. Let's start with the everyday scenario that most of us can picture: pulling up a 4K video timeline on Adobe Premiere while a client video call runs in the background. The 120Hz display makes scrubbing through that timeline feel fluid, and the 64GB of RAM means you can have Premiere, After Effects, and a web browser all open without any noticeable lag. The 2TB SSD is another practical win. You can store several high-resolution projects locally, which cuts down on external drive juggling. In my research, professionals who work with large CAD assemblies or GIS data also love the ability to keep the entire dataset on fast storage. Loading times drop dramatically compared to a traditional HDD or a smaller SSD. Now, consider the hidden trade-offs. First, the weight. At roughly 6.5 pounds, the ZBook is not the featherlight companion you'd grab for a coffee shop commute. Battery life is another practical concern. The 4K panel draws more power, and real-world tests from reviewers I've read show you'll get about 4 to 5 hours of mixed usage before hunting for an outlet. If you're planning a full day of field work without a power source, you might need a spare battery or a power bank, which adds bulk. The machine also leans heavily on integrated graphics. There's no discrete GPU listed, so while it can handle 4K video playback and light rendering, it won't replace a dedicated GPU for heavy 3D rendering or high framerate gaming. The vPro technology is a practical strength that often gets overlooked outside of IT circles. For a small business or a remote IT admin, vPro enables out-of-band management, which means you can push updates, run diagnostics, or even lock down a device remotely without the user being present. That's a real money saver for companies that need to manage a fleet of laptops. Coupled with Windows 11 Pro, you also get BitLocker encryption and other enterprise-grade security features right out of the box. Another subtle benefit is the AI-powered performance tuning that HP includes on this model. The system monitors workloads and can throttle or boost the CPU cores accordingly, which translates to a smoother experience when you switch between a heavy Photoshop edit and a light email check. It's not a game-changing feature, but it does make the day-to-day feel less jarring than you might expect from a machine with such high-end components. Who should definitely skip the ZBook? If you're primarily a gamer, the lack of a discrete GPU and the modest battery life mean you'll spend more time plugged in and still won't hit the frame rates you're used to on a dedicated gaming rig. If you're a student on a budget, the same performance can be found in a more affordable laptop that still runs Windows 11, though you'd have to sacrifice the massive RAM and the 4K panel. And if you're someone who values ultra-light portability, think a frequent traveler who wants a laptop that fits in a small bag. The ZBook size and weight might be a deal-breaker. On the value side, it helps to compare the ZBook to other workstations in the same price bracket. Dell's Precision 5570, for instance, offers a similar screen resolution but typically comes with a dedicated GPU and a slightly better battery rating, albeit at a similar cost. The MacBook Pro with the M2 Max chip delivers comparable performance for creative tasks, but you lose the native Windows environment, which can be a critical factor for engineers using AutoCAD or SolidWorks. So the ZBook's sweet spot is really in the Windows-only, enterprise-ready, high-resolution, massive RAM niche. A practical weakness that shows up in real-world anecdotes is the upgrade path. The chassis is designed for serviceability, but the 64 GB of RAM is already at the top of what the board officially supports, and the SSD is soldered in many units, meaning you can't simply swap it for a larger drive later. If,